Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 246 of Show Food. Today we'll be going over Warrior of Altaii by Robert Jordan. So, as you can see here, pretty cool basic cover. And if you know Robert Jordan's other works, the Wheel of Time series up there, then you will know that also they have pretty basic covers as well. But yeah, so Warrior of Altaii. This was, I believe, it said the first book written by Robert Jordan, and it is a treat. I love this little book. It's only a 364 self-contained little fantasy story, and I loved it. It was great, and it was very interesting throughout the entirety. Like, it was super good, and I wish there was more little small fantasy one-off books like this, because this one was great. Like, honestly, it wasn't obviously as good as The Hobbit, but it really reminded me of The Hobbit being a little self-contained story in a very complex world that could be elaborated upon in other books. Like, with The Hobbit, we see it with then the Lord of the Rings and stuff like that, but, I mean, this never got really an elaboration upon it. I'm just going to basically go over the story, a real basic interpretation. So, our main character is is a man by the name of Wulfgar, and he is of a tribe known as the Altaii. Now, there's a rival tribe known as the Marasa, and we see at the beginning of the book, Wulfgar ends up stopping by the city called Lanta, where he ends up meeting with the queens of the city. The city has two queens, which is, these positions are essentially a hereditary role, and we see as he essentially kind of takes them off, and then the story kind of progresses from there. After he ends up leaving Lanta, he ends up running into this Wanderer, who is essentially a pacifist group, kind of like, I don't remember, it's been a moment since I've read a Wheel of Time book. I read To Shadow Rising, which is the fourth book, and I got to read Fire of Heaven now, but I own all of them. So yeah, I got to read that one next. But I believe they're actually just called the Wanderers as well in Wheel of Time. It kind of reminds me of that group of people who were kind of pacifistic, trying to go about. He ends up bringing this girl named Elspeth, and ultimately his Sister of Wisdom, who is essentially, they're really similar to Aes Sedai. Well, not necessarily, because Aes Sedai are far more complex magic wielders. This has a very soft magic system. But the Sisters of Wisdom are females who perform magic. And we see as she ends up casting some bones and saying, yo, Elspeth will be vital to you and your survival, Wulfgar. So this just kind of plays out. Ultimately, Wulfgar ends up, like I said, really taking off the people at Lanta. They end up sending someone to assassinate him. This ultimately fails. Then we see as the Marasa, who have joined up with the Lantans, ultimately come and are like, yo, I want to make some peace. I'm going to be like her emissary. So we see this one by the name of Ivo ends up luring Wulfgar and some of his other Altaii into Lanta, where ultimately they are trapped, even though Wulfgar was expecting it. And then he is put into slavery by Alana, who is one of the queens. We have Alana and Ellen, or Aelin. I'd say it's Ellen, because Eilin. So, yeah, I'm just going to say Ellen, or Aelin. I'm just going to say Ellen, honestly. But yeah, so, see this, ultimately he's put into capturement. She uses him as a sex slave, to say the least. And we see he kind of has to suffer from this. She's also heavily tortured at points, but ultimately it's not to the point of breaking him. We see as a young girl ends up helping him throughout her, well, not her, but his tribulation, ends up feeding him and stuff like that so he can regain his strength. And then ultimately one of the guards ends up letting slip about the path to get out of here, and he then ends up escaping from all this. So once he escapes, he ends up running back to his place, where we learned that his companion, who we met also early on in the book, Harold, has in fact not returned. And we see then after that is Bohemund, who is the king of the Altaii, ends up calling Wulfgar in, and they are planning to attack Lanta to hopefully retrieve Harold, who is the son of Bohemund. Bohemund kind of sees Wulfgar as a son as well, because Wulfgar and Harold are very good friends, and he kind of sees him as a son through relation. So we then see as the attack on Lanta happens, but this isn't before we see some corruption within the Altaii forces themselves, because we see Talva, who is essentially a trainer of slaves. We see as she betrays Wulfgar, and then she is put under punishment because of this through this thing that's called women's justice and all of that. Since we see that the laws of women and men are separate in the Altaii culture. But yeah, so next the big thing that happens is the attack on Lanta. And we in fact see that though Lanta has been established as this impenetrable city, it has a massive 2 walls, it has an outer wall, inner wall, 12 gates. It's kind of like Jerusalem in a way. You know how Jerusalem has I believe 7 gates. So it's almost like an impenetrable city. And the Altaii penetrate that city. They end up getting in there and they take it over. They sack everything. They end up taking a lot of prisoners. We see as Ellen, who was staunchly against Wolfgar throughout the entire story so far, bends the knee pretty easily to him, but Ilana is unable to be found. So, after this, we see as they kind of consolidate their power there, like I said, well, we see as Wolfgar ends up giving, like, rewards to certain people who he's met throughout his story. He ends up giving a lot of money and transportation to the girl, little maid, cook girl, who helped him escape and kept him fed and all that. And just some other stuff here and there. Now, after this, we see as Wolfgar ends up going and searching for a Most High. Now, a Most High is essentially, it's very odd because, like, they're not elaborate and all that. Apparently, they have flying vehicles in this essentially medieval world, and they, I guess, essentially have flying saucers. We see as Wolfgar goes, finds the Most High who had been at Lanta, kind of has a confrontation with him, but ultimately he ends up quelling him, and he gets him to speak a little bit. He ends up telling you about what sounds like firearms in this world and how they can no longer be produced, but the Wanderers do have something similar to it, yet they cannot continue to be produced because the powder is no longer available or something like that. And so we kind of see that confrontation happens, and then we end up leading into another battle. The Lanta and Marasan forces have combined and rebuilt their strength after this attack on Lanta. And so then they end up clashing. Ultimately, this battle is a massive thing. We see as it breaks into multiple parts. We see at first the main battle, and then we get another battle in a ravine. And in this battle, we see, well, actually, before the first battle, we see as Elspeth suggests, yo, I think you should use bows and arrows. And this turns out to be the reason, essentially, why the Altaii win. And this was kind of the way, well, I guess kind of how Wolfgar and Elspeth were connected in destiny, as the bones said. But then we get to the battle in the ravine, where we see as the Altaii, Marasa, and Enlantans throw at each other, and ultimately the Altaii end up coming on top, but it is not without their losses. And in the end, we see as Wolfgar is left to duel Ivo. Ivo was the one who betrayed them and led to the trap in Lanta earlier on in the story. And so we see as they fight. Ultimately, this is, well, I guess I need to explain the reason why they're fighting. The reason why they're fighting in the first place is because during this battle, we see as Harold is brought out in chains, and they decapitate him on. Well, I don't know if he was brought out. I think because they mentioned that he was decapitated, but I don't remember him being brought out specifically. They just threw his head to the Altaii. So he gets decapitated somehow, and ultimately this leads to an outrage, and Wolfgar rushes up to Ivo and ultimately ends up beating him, though Ivo did have the help of some Sisters of Wisdom from Lanta with wards and spells and stuff like that on him. And he, like I said, though Wolfgar is able to defeat him, and we learn later on that the Sister of Wisdom who was protecting Ivo ultimately blew up in flames just like he did after having fought Wolfgar and lost. But yeah, so after this, we kind of see the aftermath. We see as the city of Lanta is kind of set up and everything, and with a previous conversation, we saw how the Most High, who was from Lanta, had explained to Wolfgar the reason why they had sided with the Lantans, and this was because they knew that if the Altaii ended up taking the city of Lanta, then they would become a conquering people who took cities and did not just fight on the plain. And we see this appears to be becoming true with Lanta. We see as Wolfgar grows kind of restless in having to defend this city, and he's like, he speaks with Mayra. Sorry, I might have said Maria earlier on, but Mayra is his sister of wisdom. Talks to her about this, and she's like, it's kind of a good thing. You need to like settle down, and I've seen in the bones that your family will have generations upon generations of I guess conquerors and empire builders. So let's kind of see that, but ultimately this does not end up keeping Wolfgar there. We see as people kind of discuss, and ultimately it is discovered that Sayene, Sayene, who was a Sister of Wisdom for Alana and Ellen, is building up a force and on and around the plains with the assistance of the Marasa and other kind of straggling forces. And we then see as Wolfgar and all the others end up going out to search for him. Or not search for him, but search for her. And that's kind of where the book ends. Now, I forgot to mention what happened with Ilana. Ilana was also found after this battle, and she was most certainly humbled. But yeah. So that's kind of the general story of Warrior of Altaii. Now, I love this story. I didn't really do it justice, and you need to go buy and read this book yourself because it's only a $10 book, and it's 364 pages of relatively small script. It's nothing like the Wheel of Time books, but it's it's long. I mean, it's really not necessarily long. It took me only a couple days to read it, but it is worth your money. It most certainly is worth the $10, and you are getting a boatload of value out of this. And honestly, I would probably reread it because it's just that good of the book. And like, there are little intricacies in here and there that you would probably appreciate all like further on. There's not much foreshadowing really, unless it's through the prophecies. And like, I guess that's kind of one of the more, I guess, appreciative things I have for this book is the magic system kind of refreshing because it's not really complex. You have people who can tell. You have the Sisters of Wisdom, who are essentially the magic wielders. They can tell prophecies. They can put protective words on people. They can take over people's bodies and control them. Very basic stuff like that. And then you like have the Most High, who are a little bit more complex, but we don't get a lot of characterization for them or what exactly they do. But yeah, so magic system is very refreshing, and just the general like fantasy. I really love how it is portrayed here. I love the Altaii. They're great, like culture of people. It's really cool to see. I mean, they're very Spartan-esque. They're very warrior-based, and they have like brands and stuff to indicate manhood and warrior level and stuff like that. And I just really like that. I really like Wolfgar as a character. He's pretty cool and even goofy at times, like especially with the first confrontation with the queens. And I just really enjoy reading about him and just the general story of this. It is simple, but not to a fault. It is a great little tale of the world of Altaii. Not the world, it's not called the world of Altaii. I can't even actually remember what the area is called. I don't even think it's actually listed. No, yeah, the name of the like area that they're fighting in is listed. Like you do have the name of individual cities and stuff like that because like you got your map here, but it's nothing super complex. But yeah, I genuinely love this little book. It's probably one of my favorite pieces that I've read by Robert Jordan. Now, I don't think it's better than The Great Hunt or Dragon Reborn, but it is. Okay, I might be. Okay, so a lot of people consider Shadow Rising to be one of the best books in all of all time. I personally didn't really like it, so I would say that this book is better than that. But that is a very hot take from what I've heard. I'm not really a member of the Wheel of Time fandom. I don't really like go around and like actively participate in the communities, but I do know kind of the general consensus on most of the books. And I've heard that Shadow Rising is for some reason considered goated, but I don't personally get that. But yeah, so really enjoyed this little book. It's a great little novel, and go out and read it. Oh, it's always good to do some more reading, so why not take up something that is good, short, and generally all around a very refreshing and enjoyable book. But yeah, I think that's all I really have to say. Whatever the magic system, whatever the story, I don't think I really forgot anything like intricacy-wise that I wanted to discuss. Like I said, I discussed kind of the Most High, how they're not too elaborate upon, which is probably the biggest fault of this book. But I mean, it's not really too much of a fault because they aren't super important to the story, at least the Most High. And yeah, I think that's all I really have to say about the Warrior of Altaii book, or Warrior of Altaii book by Robert Jordan. And I think that's all I really have for episode 246 of Shelf Review. So, thank you very much for watching.